Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. A large percentage of our student population are multilingual learners. All teachers really need to know how to serve the needs of our multilingual learners. Again, this not just being the concern of our English teachers. How do our other content teachers, particularly our math and our science folks, how do they integrate multilingual learners into their content? I'm very excited today to be talking to someone who's going to help us break down both how to support multilingual learners, but specifically how to support multilingual learners in STEM education. Joining us today is Dr. Darlyne de Haan, who goes by Dr. D. And Dr. D is a former director of curriculum and instruction who has held various roles in administration in New Jersey, who now has her own consulting firm, de Haan Consulting, and she's the author of a brand new book called STEM is for Everyone: Strategies for Engaging Multilingual Learners in the K-12 Classroom. Darlyne, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, John, for having me here. I'm really excited to talk to you about this.
As a ESL teacher, me as well. Let's get right into it, Darlyne. What brought you in your career to a focus on ELS, particularly as a science and math person?
I've always been interested in math and science. That's my love, that's my life. My undergraduate degrees are in this field. And I actually started working with my interest being underrepresented population on this pathway of STEM. And for females as well, since I am both. I'm a minority female. From my experiences from as early as high school, when you can really see this separation and this lack of belief that females could be good in STEM, in science fields, but also as a minority, you never felt welcome into these classes. And I went through this through high school as well. It really came to the forefront when I was in college, through Douglas College, Rutgers University. I remember going to the classes, and number one, there were hardly any females in the classes that I was in. And number two, hardly any minorities at all. How come there's hardly any females or minorities in these science classes? That's when I started paying attention to all the things that were happening, the lack of representation. I told myself, when I graduate, I'm going to do something to change that. How can I pique the interest of more minorities and females in science, mathematics, so that we don't have what I was seeing, hardly any representation at all. But as I progressed more through it, it's not that females aren't interested. It's not that Blacks, minorities are not interested. It's that this thing called the leaky STEM pipeline, it's this systematic way that we, minorities and females, get dropped from this STEM pipeline. And that became my interest. And then once I got to the level that I was working on my doctorate, that's when I switched over to multilingual learners from speaking with my professor.
So, Darlyne, I wasn't thinking of asking the following question, but to your point or to your comment about females and minorities in particular being quote unquote dropped from the STEM pipeline, what were, if you don't mind educating us a little bit, what were some of the reasons why females and minorities were dropped from this pipeline?
Number one, there's a lack of belief that you have the fortitude and the aptitude to be successful. A lot of times there were, and I grew up with just my mother and my other two sisters. If you don't have that income to do those summer programs. We couldn't afford summer camps. All of those things that had that exposure, you didn't have it. You're going to enroll in these classes, taking these classes, and you're at a disadvantage because you don't have the same opportunities that the other non-minorities had so that they can be successful in this coursework. Or you just don't know about it because you didn't have that outside school opportunities. If you don't have it, number one, you don't know about it, but the fact of the matter is you have an interest in it, but you're not given the opportunities. It's limited, and they pick and choose who can get into these special classes and who can't. It's not like English 101 when everyone has to take English 101. It becomes a system of selecting and choosing who gets into these courses. And I didn't have any of those other, what they call socioeconomic situations. I more so had socioeconomic barriers is what I faced. And that's what kept me and many others through the research out of these classes. You don't have the prerequisite knowledge. You can't afford the summer camps to get the exposure. For L's, you don't have the language, the prerequisite language that's required. You don't have all of those things, so you end up dropping out. You get to middle school, the interest isn't there anymore because you haven't been exposed to it.
Makes sense to me. It really leads us right into my next question, which is why should we care about? Obviously, you've already highlighted that we need to give more opportunities for women, for minorities, to truly be equitable in providing all of our students with exposure to the opportunities that are before them. Could you go into a little bit more why, particularly STEM education, is important for multilingual learners? Why should we all care about this besides what we've already been talking about?
Number one, STEM is a poverty buster. The money, the salary, the income that can be generated in the STEM field is substantial. On top of that, 60%, a minimum, at least 60% of L's live in poverty. Here you have a field that can change the trajectory of a generation and the generations to come. Secondly, even if a student doesn't want to go into a STEM field, people have to understand STEM is not a course. STEM is a way of thinking. It's a 21st century skill. It's problem solving. It's learning how to think. It's learning how to work collaboratively. How do we come to solutions? Even though you might not want to go into a STEM field, you still, from being in STEM, are going to learn these 21st century skills that will be successful in any domain of an area where you want to work. STEM is important for those reasons, but you have to have exposure. And thirdly, the world is smaller because of the internet. So if we want to solve global problems, we need to make sure that the people who are solving these global problems represent the world in which we live, not just a very small population of people, because you need the perspectives and the experiences from everyone needs to be able to contribute to solving world problems. If the team working together to solve a problem doesn't look like the world in which we live, then it is a biased solution. I might have never experienced a tsunami, but someone who has experienced a tsunami can bring that experience with them. And I was just in Saudi Arabia with the English language specialist, because I also do work with the Department of State under the English language specialist program. And I spoke on the importance of English and globalization because the internet has removed borders. We need to make sure that we're having representations of multicultural people to solve global problems.
You sold me. Darlene, that all makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me that certain segments of our population have been shut out from accessing STEM opportunities, particularly women, and for the purposes of our conversation, multilingual learners. This begs the question. We've been doing it wrong in terms of helping our multilingual learners access STEM opportunities. What have we been doing wrong in not attracting more diversity into our STEM programs, projects in schools? And what would be a better way to attract and retain more diverse students in these programs in our schools?
One of the first things I would think about are our teacher education programs. My research found out that about 60% of deans of schools stated that they don't properly prepare their future teachers for multilingual populations. There's a general education route that you can take. If you want to work with L's, and it's a special track, you have to sign up to take that track. If you wanted to work with special education, you sign up to take that track. If you want to work in urban areas, you take the urban education track. Most of the teacher education programs, not all of them, but over 90% of the teacher education programs, you have to be on the track to be that field. So what that means is that the majority of your gen ed teachers are coming out with no training on how to teach kids whose first language isn't English. If you want to make a difference, we have to change how we're structuring our teacher education programs. And then at the school level, you have to make sure that everyone takes professional development on teaching special populations. It's not a special track. If I may digress for a minute, when I was a VP and I went to observe classes, I noticed that in this one math class, the L's were in the back and separated. I go to the teacher and I say, why do you have the English language learners in the back of the class all spread out? They weren't even together so that they can help each other. And she said, oh, Dr. de Haan, because I don't speak their language and I don't know what they're talking about. I said, well, you took away their support. Number one, they're in the back of the room and they don't speak English very well. Number two, you separated them so they don't even have someone who might know a little bit more English than they know, so they can help them understand what's being taught. So they're on an island alone. And this is not because she didn't want them to learn. Her thing was classroom management. I don't know what they're saying and I want to keep them on track, but no one told her. So you can't blame her. She did what she thought was going to be the best solution. That's why I'm talking about you have to train all the teachers, because most of them are coming out of teacher education programs with no training on how to teach this population.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Dr. de Haan or Dr. D, because it references something that you and I were talking about before, and that is the way that we also select students for STEM programming.
Mhm.
And you're highlighting that in a way, no discredit to the teacher. She was using language ability to determine whether or not students were going to be able to access STEM learning. Clearly, we want to have a pipeline of students for STEM learning that isn't based on language ability. Because again, and even I say this in my coaching work, Dr. D, and that is just because a student might not have language skills in English, that doesn't mean they're not a good science student or a good math student or a good social studies student. They very well might have had good instruction in their primary language or not. That's a whole nother subject. But don't assume just because a student doesn't have the language skills that they are devoid of all skills, particularly skills in the maths and the sciences. So this begs my next question, which is, if we have been doing it wrong and we have been selecting students for STEM programs, enrichment, etc., based on language, what's another way, or what do you think are some better ways to know who we should be in terms of our students bringing into STEM programming?
Number one, I think all students should have the opportunity to be in a STEM program. Take this in the book. Do not confuse cognitive ability with language proficiency, or do not confuse language proficiency with cognitive ability. And I think you hit it on the head. Just because I can't explain it in English doesn't mean that I don't understand it. Teachers need to be trained as to how do I use language proficiency. They have to really understand what kids can do at different levels of language proficiency. In Jersey, we have WIDA. We have WIDA, we have access scores, and the kids take these tests and it lets them know what can they do for speaking, writing, reading, and listening. Then you can take that information and be able to scaffold or differentiate the instruction that's based on where their skill levels are. Teachers might say, oh, that's ridiculous, that's too much, there's no way I can do that. But what you have to understand is that special education strategies, multilingual learner strategies, are just strategies. And I think we have to stop labeling them as such, because the moment you tell a teacher this is a multilingual learner strategy, a teacher's going to say, oh, but I teach gen ed. You tell somebody this is a special education strategy, I don't teach special ed, I'm in general education. Why don't we just call them good teaching strategies, period? And then when you have an L, then you can say, okay, well, I know that with L's, I'm going to have to make this change. What are we talking about for L's? Using visuals, letting them use a dictionary, letting them use their L1, their first language. All of these are really great strategies in general. How am I teaching vocabulary? Because your struggling student also is going to have difficulty in these same areas. How can I better teach vocabulary? How can I use the brain? Like, one of the biggest things, and I really call myself a brain geek, is that you have to understand how the brain learns. You have to understand how the brain works. Once you can understand working memory and how the brain works, and why that prior knowledge is so important, it's all connected to the brain. So if we can have that piece, then they'll be able to understand, oh, this is why I use prior knowledge. Oh, it's not just good for L's, it's good for everyone. So that's all a part of the professional development and what the teachers need to know. So we need to stop having criteria so that all kids can be exposed to it. And then ask yourself, how can this L demonstrate their learning? See what they can do WIDA-wise. There's so many ways that they can demonstrate their knowledge. And we have to give that opportunity to do those things. And we have to train our teachers to understand how to do them as well.
Darlyne, mentioning this WIDA, that New Jersey uses WIDA. And you were also mentioning the use of visuals and non-linguistic representations for L's. You were mentioning focusing on vocabulary and building vocabulary. Again, something that's going to be good for all students, not just L's. You're really highlighting some effective scaffolds for multilingual learners, and again, for other general education students as well. And you mentioned the WIDA. Do you know what those different levels of English proficiency are on the WIDA? And what would be some of the specific strategies or scaffolds teachers could use for that particular subset of English language learners?
There's 6 levels, from pre-production stage, which are your newcomers, that's the silent stage. The newcomer, level 1, pre-production level, is not going to stand in front of a class and try to say anything. It's not going to happen. But they're paying attention to how they're speaking, the grammar formations, paying attention. They're 100% alert. They are listening to exactly what's being told, but they're not going to stand in front of the class and do an oral report. You're not looking at the WIDA to really understand, what can the kid do at level 1 for speaking, writing, reading, and listening? What can the kid do? What's the difference between what happens between level 1 and level 2 and level 2 and level 3? Once we get to 4, 5, and 6, they're pretty decent. 6 is like fluent. Then you have your speech emergence, which is about the 3rd level. It lets you know exactly what the kids can do at each level, and then you can be able to provide scaffolds according to these different levels of language acquisition. This guides your instruction. WIDA is really important for that. Some of the things that you can do based on the level, you have sentence frames where it helps kids able to start creating the sentence. They can use visuals, they can draw, they can use pictures to be able to explain what they're doing. There's so many different things that the teachers can create. And now with AI, you can use AI to also take a passage and say, my student has a WIDA score in reading, say, of a 2.3. Take this passage and change it so that my 2.3 can read it. It does it for you. So there's really no reason now why a teacher can't take a passage and have it adjusted to the student's reading level. WIDA gives you that. And WIDA also has these can-do descriptors. It's called WIDA can-do descriptors. It tells you what the kids can do at each level of the language proficiency. There's also, they have a chart where you can put in your students' names for each level. So when the teacher is planning, in front of them, they would have the paper stating, oh, these are on my level ones. This is what I know that they can do for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Let me see how I'm going to do my small group instruction. Small group instruction is the key to student achievement. You can now have this chart that they give you from the WIDA website where you can have all of your kids as to where they are in speaking, reading, writing, and listening, so that when you're planning, you plan it with this chart next to you so you can create instruction that's going to meet the needs of every child. The resources are there, and AI makes it that much easier to be able to complete that task.
Dr. D, you've done a really nice job of explaining how teachers can be scaffolding for multilingual learners depending on their level of English ability to, again, help them access science and math and really even social studies content. Since we're also focusing on STEM and STEM being for everyone, you've written this great book, STEM is for Everyone. Let's talk a little bit about some of the specific strategies that teachers might use to integrate multilingual learners or ELs into STEM education.
One of the things that's really different in the book is that I created 6 fictitious students, and each of these students is presented with their WIDA scores, what they can do at each level. And then I have STEM challenges in every chapter, and the teachers are given these students. And there's a QR code there, and I also use an AI. These students speak to the teacher so the teacher can learn about them, what their levels of proficiency are, so that when we're going through the STEM challenges, I'm letting them know this is how you scaffold for Jean-Pierre. And I have students from different countries and different backgrounds, some with high levels of language proficiency, middle and low levels of language proficiency. The book guides the teacher through full STEM challenges. They're cited, they can go to the same sites and pull all the resources and the materials. It gives them authentic situations where you're seeing the students, you're hearing the students, you're looking at how I took a regular science STEM challenge and how I scaffolded it for the L so that the teacher can understand that's how I do it. I took the 5 E's and I connected it to the STEM challenge. I took claims, evidence, and reasoning and showed the teachers how would you explain claims, evidence, reasoning to L's when that happens to be something that all students have a challenge with, is how do I use claims, evidence, and reasoning? All the main components that a science teacher would encounter in the classroom are in the book. The sentence stems are included, sentence frames are included. Also, other videos that I've created are there to make that extra connection for them to get more background knowledge. This is not just a book with words, it's interactive where the teachers can become a part of the lessons that are being taught and hopefully connect to what they're doing in the classroom.
And I definitely hope, especially all the exemplars that you're providing, that people do access the book. You're mentioning these STEM challenges. Could you walk us through, say, one of them?
One challenge is learning about the water cycle. You can use different prompts for the water cycle. There's visuals involved there, the vocabulary. We use a Freire model. We use a lot of notice and wonder. To really be effective, you have to know what the students know. So you do a notice and wonder. You remove this science from it, and kids will really begin to understand this is just a conversation. If I show you a picture, what do you notice and what do you wonder about what's going on? And you can then start to have anecdotal notes on what these kids are bringing to the table as far as their knowledge for these things. We use this thing as a chart, and it's how to do vocabulary. So one of the things, I always have this phrase, the brain wants to make sense of things before details. Allow the brain to make sense of the information before you start bombarding them with scientific terms and scientific definition, context that's text heavy. We want to try to make that as light as possible. We're talking about the water cycle. So you're learning about clouds. We don't want to go right into all of these scientific names for the clouds. One of the things you want to do first is you show a picture. You're showing this cumulus cloud, and you ask the kids in your own words, what do you notice? What do you wonder? How would you describe it? Fluffy, white, looks like an animal, whatever the case may be. You let the kids pull from their brain what they know. And then you make these connections and you say, oh, great, these are all the things. It's fluffy, it's white, it can form different shapes. If you speak in Spanish, you might say blanco. And then you say, all of those descriptions, this cloud is known as a cumulus cloud. So now in the brain, it's saying, oh, fluffy, white. These neural pathways are going to form saying, I now associate white, fluffy, make shapes with cumulus cloud. Now you can go and use a FIRE model where you can say, draw a picture of it, where you can say, in your own words, give a definition of it, name something that's the opposite of it. Graphic organizers are great, but if you're giving a kid a graphic organizer who doesn't speak the language well, and you put the word cumulus cloud in the middle of the FIRE model, and you want them to fill the other 4 squares, you're asking them for details before they made sense of it. So if you remember, the brain wants to make sense before it wants details. That means prior knowledge. That means develop schema. And then you can move from there.
What resonates with me with what you're saying, Darlyne, is making that sense meaning first. An easy way to do that is, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Let's talk a little bit about, you also mentioned the water cycle. And I know in a lot of science classes, they will present the water cycle as a diagram. How might science teachers manipulate that diagram for multilingual learners so multilingual learners can access it?
One of the things we do is called the slow reveal. You'll have the picture of the diagram, but then the first picture is just going to be a little bit of it. You only show in a small amount of the picture. And you ask the kids, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you see? And then they talk about what they see. Then your next picture is going to reveal a little bit more about the diagram. They're making sense. That's what they're doing. They're making sense in their mind as to what's going on. You don't worry about evaporation, condensation. You don't worry about those words, any of those things yet. You just want them to look at the picture and try to make sense, state what they're seeing, what they think is going on. And then on the third one, it's a full picture of the water cycle, and ask, what do you notice that's happening over here? What do you think this arrow represents? Why is this arrow going up? Show them the picture. This is evaporation. This is condensation. These are all these things going on. It's too much. Just called the slow reveal. Reveal small parts of the diagram. Talk about it. Have the kids converse with each other, because by doing this, number one, what's happening, which is another STEM strong point, kids are hearing the language. Kids are speaking the language. Kids are listening to the language. And then eventually they'll write. STEM allows all 4 domains to occur. When you're doing this slow reveal, the kids are getting all of that every day. They're building their language skills. By not jumping right away with all of this heavy vocabulary, the kids are being able to make sense of things beforehand. The slow reveal, have them talk, have them think it through. And once they notice, oh, this is going up, or what do you see what's happening when it's going up? Have talk about that. This is our new word, evaporation. Why is the arrows coming down from the cloud? Talk about what they think is going on. What happens? What would come out of a cloud? You're having them make sense of these things slowly so that they can make sense of it and put it all together.
What have we not talked about when it comes to multilingual learners and STEM education that you want our listeners to know?
We've said this earlier, professional development. We have to make sure that all teachers are getting that same professional development. So they're all hearing the same thing. Not just in STEM itself as a course on STEM, kids are also being left out of the higher math. Algebra 1 is the gateway to STEM. You have to go through Algebra 1 in order for you to hit any of these other higher math and science classes. The last data that I had in 2014, 2015, there were almost 980,000 high school students, multilingual learners. Of that, 980,000 multilingual learner high school students, only 9% took Algebra 1. Less than 2% took geometry, pre-calc, or calc. We have to do something about that. All students should be exposed to Algebra 1, at least. so that they can prepare themselves to take these other high-level courses. But if you only have 9%, 9% of L's who are taking Algebra 1, they can't take the other classes. They don't have the prerequisite skills. That, to me, is a problem that needs to be looked at to see how do we increase our L numbers. Maybe you'll have an Algebra 1 class for L's.
What would that look like?
The district that I was just in, that's what they had. They had an algebra class for L's. That teacher needs to be high school certified in Algebra 1, but they also have to have that ESL background or be able to speak the language of those students so that they can be able to explain it to them. But nowadays, you can take things and have it translated. So it's not really, you don't have to, as long as they can read the language, they could be able to explain it. But that way, at least those students are being able to get that math based on their level. Say they don't have the manpower and they're not able to create this bilingual Algebra 1 class, then their regular gen ed teacher needs to be able to understand, number one, those language proficiencies and what can that teacher do at that level for those students to be able to differentiate it. For instance, you can have an algebra problem, and one, you can make it visual. You can do bar modeling all the way up through Algebra 1, where it comes visual. And that reduces the linguistic requirement because you can draw rectangles to show this is the unknown, this is twice as many, this is 3 times as more, but you can take algebra concepts and show it visually. You can also have a problem. One kid writes step 1, it goes to their partner, they do step 2, it goes back and forth, and they're able to watch the work to see, oh no, you made a mistake here. Of course, there's a science behind that because you have to make sure that the partner is stronger in the math so that they can guide that other student. There's also a thing that I talk about in the book that's called 2 pairs in a quad. And it's how you can create cooperative learning that supports the English language learner in the classroom. How do you create these 2 pairs in a quad? You have it where you have face partners and you have shoulder partners, and they work together in a quad where you can also differentiate the work. So you have 2 face partners that might be similar in this skill set, and you have the other face partners who are similar in another skill that you have to differentiate it because their skill level is a little different, but they work together. And then when they have a problem, they go to their shoulder partner to get assistance there. And then if their shoulder partners can help them, then they go to the whole quad and work together as a quad. It aligns with ask 3 before me. So they are actually asking 3 people before they get to the teacher. This frees the teacher up to be able to facilitate in the classroom and walk around and help as needed. But it allows them to practice the language, get assistance as they need it. And earlier I spoke about your level 1 student or your level 2 language proficiency student. They will speak in a small group before they're going to speak in front of a whole class. Now that pre-production student or early production student, they might talk to that one person in front of them or to the person next to them before they're going to speak into a group. So 2 pairs in a quad is a phenomenal way in order to allow that L to integrate with English speaking so they can hear the language and also allow them to get the supports. There is a system to how you create these 2 pairs in the quad, and that's something that I talk about in the book. But there's a lot of ways that you can do this to really have the inclusivity for these L's to feel that they are a part of the class and that their difference is embraced, and that teachers are looking at these students not through a deficit lens. We're looking at these students through an asset lens as to what can they bring to the discussion.
Indeed. Shifting our mindsets again from deficit to asset-based learning. Dr. de Haan, where can people find out more information about you and the work that you do?
I have 2 websites. One website is www.brainbased, with a D's, brainbasedscience.com. And on this website, videos are there. There's a lot of resources are there that you can utilize. Every time I do a professional development or workshop, I put it up on the website. And I also have another website It's www.neighborhood-science.com. And that's where I actually do science with the kids. I do a lot of science demonstrations for the kids that teachers can also use to integrate into the classrooms. Information about me and information about the book is on there as well.
Thank you, Darlyne. This has been a fun conversation.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.